There's a truth most people never say out loud, yet it quietly shapes the way others treat you every single day. Some people don't hate you because of anything you did. They hate you because of what you represent. That discomfort you feel around certain people, that strange tension in conversations that look normal on the surface, that subtle shift in energy when you walk into a room, it isn't random, it isn't confusion, and it definitely isn't always your fault. There are silent patterns behind it, patterns that repeat across workplaces, friendships, even families. And once you start to notice them, everything changes. What looks like politeness begins to feel hollow. What sounds like support begins to reveal hidden competition. What feels like distance starts to expose something much deeper than simple dislike. This is where things get interesting, because the kind of hate that has no clear reason is rarely about you at all. It's often a reaction, a mirror, a reflection of something the other person cannot deal with inside themselves. And the unsettling part is that these behaviors are subtle enough to go unnoticed, yet strong enough to affect your confidence, your decisions, and even the way you see yourself over time. There are people who will smile at you and still feel uneasy in your presence. There are people who will speak to you politely and still carry a quiet resistance toward you. And there are people who will never openly admit how they feel, but their actions will slowly reveal the truth. This video will break down those hidden behaviors, the ones that don't get talked about enough, the ones that most people ignore or misunderstand. You'll start to recognize the signs of passive disrespect that doesn't look like disrespect at first. You'll understand why fake politeness often replaces real connection. You'll see how secret competition can exist even in casual conversations, and why some people turn your presence into a silent challenge without you even realizing it. These are not obvious reactions. They don't come with loud words or clear conflict. Instead, they exist in tone, timing, body language, and small choices that seem harmless on the surface but carry a deeper meaning underneath. There's also a psychological side to this that most people never consider. When someone feels threatened, they don't always respond with direct confrontation. In many cases, they respond with subtle avoidance, quiet judgment, or indirect behavior that slowly creates distance. This is not because you did something wrong, it's often because something about you highlights a gap in them. Confidence can trigger insecurity. Authenticity can expose discomfort. Growth can remind others of what they are not doing. And instead of addressing those feelings, people sometimes project them outward in ways that are hard to detect but easy to feel. That's why this topic matters more than it seems. Because without understanding these patterns, it becomes easy to blame yourself for reactions that were never truly about you in the first place. As this video unfolds, you will start connecting dots that may have felt confusing before. Moments that once felt unclear will begin to make sense. You'll see why certain people behave differently around you compared to others. You'll understand why some relationships feel slightly off even when nothing obvious is wrong. And more importantly, you'll learn how to protect your energy without becoming cold, how to stay aware without becoming paranoid, and how to move forward without carrying unnecessary doubt. This is not about overthinking every interaction. It's about seeing clearly so you stop questioning yourself in situations where the real issue lies elsewhere. There are also lesser-known patterns that rarely get discussed, even though they appear in everyday life. For example, people who feel uncomfortable around you may unconsciously try to minimize your presence, not by attacking you directly, but by reducing your impact in subtle ways. They may ignore your ideas until someone else repeats them. They may keep interactions short while being more engaged with others. They may avoid eye contact just enough to create a sense of distance without making it obvious. These actions might seem small on their own, but when they repeat, they form a clear pattern. And once you recognize that pattern, it becomes impossible to unsee it. Another overlooked behavior is emotional inconsistency. Some people will act normal one day and distant the next, not because of anything you did, but because their internal reaction to you shifts based on their own state of mind. This inconsistency creates confusion, and that confusion often leads people to question themselves instead of recognizing what's really happening. By the time you reach the end of this video, you won't just notice these behaviors, you'll understand them. You'll see the hidden dynamics behind unexplained dislike, and you'll realize that what once felt personal is often impersonal at its core. That realization is powerful because it frees you from the need to constantly prove yourself to people who have already decided how they feel. often for reasons they don't fully understand themselves. And that's exactly why watching until the end matters. Each behavior builds on the next, each insight adds another layer, and the full picture only becomes clear when you see it all together. Missing even one part can leave the story incomplete. And this is one of those topics where the full understanding changes how you see people permanently. So stay with this until the end, because what you're about to learn isn't just about others. It's about how you interpret their actions, how you respond, and how you protect your sense of self in environments that aren't always as neutral as they appear. If any part of this already feels familiar, then you're in the right place. Welcome to the channel, where we break down the hidden psychology behind human behavior in a way that is simple, clear, and real. If you want to see people more clearly and understand what's happening beneath the surface, make sure to subscribe and stay connected, because the more you understand these patterns, the harder it becomes for them to control how you feel and how you move forward. And the worst part is this: you probably did nothing wrong, not a single clear mistake, not a moment you can point to and say that is where it all started. Yet the feeling is still there, quiet but constant, like something under the surface that refuses to go away. And that is what makes it confusing, because most people are taught to look for reasons, to search for cause and effect, to believe that if someone treats them differently, then there must be something they did to deserve it. But in many cases, that belief is wrong, and it keeps people stuck in a loop where they question themselves instead of observing what is actually happening around them. Because when someone dislikes you for no clear reason, it does not come from logic, it comes from something deeper, something they are not even fully aware of. And that is why their behavior does not match any clear event or action. It just exists, subtle, indirect, but consistent enough to be felt. And you notice it in small ways, the kind of ways that are easy to ignore at first but become harder to dismiss over time. Like when someone suddenly becomes cold without explanation. Their tone changes, their energy shifts, their words stay polite, but something behind them feels empty, like a layer is missing. And even though nothing obvious is said, the silence between words starts to say more than the words themselves. And then there are those moments where people smile at you, but the smile feels incomplete, like it stops before it reaches their eyes, like it is performed rather than felt. And you stand there trying to understand why something so normal feels so off, why a simple interaction leaves a strange weight instead of ease. And this is where most people make a mistake. They assume the problem must be inside them. They replay conversations in their head. They analyze their tone, their words, their behavior, searching for something they might have done wrong. But the truth is often much simpler and much harder to accept at the same time. The truth is that not all negative reactions are earned. Some are projected, some are triggered, some are reflections of internal discomfort that has nothing to do with you directly. And that is why the feeling cannot be explained easily, because it was never created by your actions in the first place. It was created by how your presence interacts with something unresolved in someone else. People who dislike you without reason follow patterns, not obvious patterns, not loud or dramatic ones, but quiet patterns that repeat in small, consistent ways. And once you start noticing them, it becomes clear that what seemed random is actually structured. What felt confusing begins to make sense, and the first pattern often shows up as passive disrespect, the kind that hides behind normal behavior but carries a subtle message underneath, like when you speak and your words are ignored as if they were never said, or when you share an idea and someone immediately talks over you. Not aggressively, not in a way that creates conflict, but just enough to shift attention away from you, and it happens more than once, enough to form a pattern, and when you notice it, it feels strange because there is no direct attack, no clear insult, just a repeated dismissal that slowly reduces your presence in the interaction. And this kind of behavior is often rooted in something simple but uncomfortable, a sense of threat, not physical, not obvious, but psychological. Because when someone feels that your presence challenges their position, their confidence, or their identity in some way, they may not confront you directly. Instead, they respond in quieter ways that allow them to maintain control without exposing their discomfort. And that is why passive disrespect exists. It is controlled, indirect, and easy to deny if questioned, but it leaves a clear impact over time. Then comes another pattern that looks positive on the surface but feels empty underneath: fake politeness. The kind of behavior that follows social rules perfectly but lacks any real warmth, where everything sounds correct, the words are right, the tone is acceptable, but something essential is missing, like the connection is not real, and you notice it in forced smiles that appear and disappear too quickly, in short replies that close conversations instead of continuing them, in a tone that feels flat even when the words are friendly. And this creates a strange situation where nothing is technically wrong, yet nothing feels right either. And that is because respect is not just about words, it is about intention, it is about presence. And when those elements are missing, politeness becomes a mask rather than a genuine expression. And people use this mask when they want to keep distance without creating conflict, when they want to appear neutral while feeling something else internally. And over time, this behavior becomes more noticeable because it lacks consistency with real connection. It feels controlled, measured, almost calculated, and that is what makes it stand out once you start paying attention. Another pattern begins to reveal itself in the form of secret competition, a quiet shift where normal interactions turn into subtle comparisons, where conversations are no longer just exchanges of ideas but become opportunities to measure, to compete, to establish position. And this shows up in small ways, like when you share something positive and it is immediately followed by someone else trying to match it or exceed it, or when your achievements are acknowledged briefly but quickly minimized, or when your mistakes are highlighted more than necessary, not in a helpful way, but in a way that shifts focus. And this pattern is often driven by insecurity, because your presence triggers something that makes the other person feel less certain about themselves, and instead of addressing that feeling internally, they respond externally by turning the interaction into a comparison, even if it is not obvious, even if it is subtle enough to pass as normal conversation. And this creates a dynamic where you are being evaluated without being told, where your presence becomes a point of tension rather than ease. As these patterns continue, another one becomes harder to ignore: the shift in energy that happens specifically around you, where a person behaves one way with others and a different way with you. And this difference is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just a slight change in tone, a reduction in engagement, a pause that feels longer than usual, a silence that carries weight. And even though no words explain it, you feel it clearly, and this is where many people start doubting themselves, because there is no clear evidence, no direct statement, just a feeling that something is different, and they wonder if it is all in their head. But it is not, because human interaction is not only about words, it is also about energy, about attention, about presence, and when those elements shift consistently in one direction, it creates a pattern that can be felt even if it cannot be easily explained. And this pattern often reveals more than direct words ever could, because it shows how someone reacts when they are not controlling every detail of their behavior, when their natural response begins to surface. Then there is the pattern of quiet exclusion, one of the most subtle yet impactful behaviors, where distance is created without explanation, without confrontation, without any clear reason given, and it appears in situations where you are not invited, not included, not considered in the same way as others. And it does not happen once. It repeats, it becomes a pattern, and over time it creates a sense of separation that is difficult to ignore. And what makes it more complex is that it is easy to justify on the surface. There is always a reason that can be given: timing, circumstance, coincidence. But when it happens consistently, those reasons start to lose their meaning and the pattern becomes clear. And this kind of behavior often comes from a desire to create distance without addressing the underlying cause, because direct confrontation would require honesty, and honesty would expose something the person may not be ready to face. So instead, they choose indirect methods that allow them to maintain control while avoiding clarity. When all of these patterns are seen together, a deeper truth begins to form, one that changes the way you interpret these experiences. People do not hate randomly. Their reactions are connected to something, even if it is not visible on the surface. And often that connection is not about your actions, but about what you represent to them. Because confidence can highlight insecurity. Authenticity can make others aware of their own lack of it. Growth can remind someone of where they feel stuck. And these reflections are not always comfortable. So instead of facing them, some people respond by creating distance, by reducing your presence, by shifting their behavior in subtle ways that protect their own sense of stability. And this is why unexplained dislike feels confusing, because it is not based on a clear event. It is based on an internal reaction that is being expressed expressed indirectly. Understanding this leads to a shift in perspective, a reframing that changes how you see yourself in these situations. Because once you recognize that not all negative reactions are a result of your actions, you stop carrying responsibility that was never yours to begin with. You stop trying to fix what you did not break, and you begin to observe instead of absorb. And this does not mean ignoring behavior or accepting everything without question. It means seeing clearly, recognizing patterns, and understanding where they come from. And this clarity creates distance, not physical distance, but emotional distance from unnecessary doubt, from over-analysis, from the constant need to adjust yourself to fit reactions that were never about you. And this is where strength begins to develop, not from changing who you are, but from understanding what is happening around you without losing your sense of self in the process. Because in the end, the most powerful realization is simple but deep. Some people do not dislike you, they dislike who they become around you. And that difference matters because it shifts the focus away from your identity and places it on their reaction. And once you see that clearly, the confusion starts to fade, the patterns become easier to recognize, and the weight of unexplained negativity begins to lose its hold. Not because the behavior disappears, but because your understanding of it changes. And that understanding is what allows you to move forward without carrying what was never yours. If this felt personal, then it probably connected to something real in your life, and that matters more than anything else. Because moments like these remind you that you're not the only one who notices these silent patterns. You're not the only one who feels that quiet tension that no one talks about, and you're definitely not alone in trying to understand it. There are people out there who see what you see, who feel what you feel, and who are also learning how to move through it without losing themselves in the process. And that's what this space is about, a place where things that usually stay unspoken finally make sense, where confusion turns into clarity, and where you start seeing people in situations for what they really are instead of what they appear to be on the surface. So if something in this video stayed with you, if even one part made you pause and think differently, then stay connected, not because you have to, but because understanding these patterns only gets deeper from here. Like the video so it can reach someone else who might be going through the same thing quietly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next, and share this with someone who needs clarity but doesn't have the words for it yet. Sometimes the right message at the right moment can change how someone sees everything, and you never know who might need that shift today.